My son is having a nap right now, so until he wakes up, I'm going to answer your guys' questions that you had on my previous Ask Me Anything. Let's get ready for another Ask Me Anything. That was a kind of weird intro. Let's get ready for another Ask Me Anything. Okay, Sebastian Carlos. Hey, I'm a 13-year-old using an Oklahoma Joe's Highland smoker. What do you think is the easiest thing to cook on from your experience? Thanks so much, Sebastian. That's really cool that you're getting into barbecue so early. And by the way, guys, if you have any questions that come up while you're watching this video, just drop them in the comments section and I'll reply to them in the next Ask Me Anything session. Okay, Sebastian, the easiest thing to cook on for a beginner like yourself is probably a pork loin or pork tenderloin. That's a good cheap cut of meat to get started on. And then once you cook a really good pork loin or pork tenderloin, I'd probably graduate from there to like a pork butt. Pork is pretty inexpensive, and pork butt cooks in a similar way to a brisket. So pork butt is kind of getting your training wheels on for working your way up to cooking a brisket. And then after cooking a pork butt, I'd probably do ribs. And then after I do ribs a couple times, I'd probably get a brisket, because you want to jump into it as soon as possible. The best thing you can cook, in my opinion, my favorite barbecue is brisket, and the sooner you can get there, the better. But start out with those cheaper cuts of meat first, just so you get a better idea of how your smoker cooks, how it operates, hot spots, temperature control, all that sort of stuff. And then smoke your first brisket, and then you'll be a barbecue hero. Okay, Mario Rodea. Hey, Mario, thanks a lot, man. Hi, have you considered other offset smokers besides the Oklahoma Joe's? Interesting you mentioned that, because I just bought a Yoder offset smoker. It's used, but it's a giant Yoder Chisholm 2 trailer smoker, and I just cooked on it yesterday and did a brisket, and it was amazing. It was so good, and it was so much fun to cook on. So yeah, I did just upgrade to a larger Yoder offset. Other offsets I've considered are the smaller Yoder offsets that are still bigger than my Oklahoma Joe's. And if you're on a budget and you're just looking for a cheaper offset smoker, I've heard the Picos, I think it's like Old Country Picos or Brazos or something like that. They make some good smokers as well. I've seen a lot of YouTube channels out there that are reporting good things on those. I think they sell them out of Academy, depending on where you live. So yeah, Oklahoma Joe's, great smoker. The Picos and Brazos smokers are also really good, or so I've heard. Okay, Xander Grace, what's up, brother? Have you given a lamb leg a go yet? I have not. No, I have not cooked a lamb leg. Actually, a lot of people keep asking me about that. I didn't realize that they were so popular. I have seen frozen lamb legs in the grocery store, but I've never cooked one before. From what I've heard, they're a little bit leaner than other cuts of meat. I would assume that you cook them like a pork shoulder or a pork butt, but I'd love to try one day. Yeah, you said, especially with the current meat prices, Australian lamb is by far blowing beef prices away. That's really cool that you're looking at alternative meats to cook. I've gone the route of just cooking pork because pork is cheap. Chicken is still cheaper than beef, but I haven't cooked lamb yet. I will let you know if I do cook one, though. Stephanie Markey. Hey, Stephanie, thanks so much for your question. I have trouble getting good bark and smoke rings on pork shoulder in a Traeger pellet smoker. Any tips? Yeah, the big question, how do you get good smoke flavor on a pellet grill? Everyone's got that question on their mind. Okay, so here's what I do. First of all, make sure the meat starts really cold, because in a lot of people's opinion, I'm not going to accept it for fact until I test either way, but in a lot of people's opinion, the smoke ring stops developing when you get above about 140 degrees Fahrenheit. So the longer you can keep the meat in that below that temperature zone while the smoke is hitting it, theoretically you're supposed to get a better smoke ring. I think my personal experience has generally jived with that, but I've never done any tests or anything. So that's one thing you could do is start with your meat really cold to get a good smoke ring. The other thing is spritz it with a bit of water before you apply your rub on your meat, or use a mustard binder, something that provides the meat with a little bit of moisture. Again, other people's opinion, all the barbecue experts out there, I haven't tested this, but they say that smoke tends to cling to more moist meat better. So that's another thing you can do, is right before you apply your rub, give it a couple spritzes with some water, or just use a mustard binder or Worcestershire sauce or hot sauce, anything to add moisture. The other thing you can do is you can use a pellet tray or a pellet tube to add some more smoke. I know recently a lot of people are saying, oh, it gives a bitter taste. I think that's true. I have experienced that. If you use a pellet tray or a pellet tube, you can get a bitter, acrid, I don't know how to pronounce that, taste on the back of your tongue if you're cooking for a long time. But everything in moderation. The times that I've cooked with maybe only half a pellet tray or one full pellet tray, and then I just stop adding more pellets to the pellet tray or the pellet tube, it's provided better bark, it's provided better smoke flavor, it's provided darker bark, the bark has set better and just looks better, and it hasn't had that bitter taste. So that's another thing you can do, is you can use a pellet tray or a pellet tube. Just don't overdo it, because you can get those acrid tastes, very acidic and bitter tastes and notes if you use too much of it, if you smoke with too much of that. Another thing you can do is you can add your pellets directly to the deflector plate or the drip plate of the Traeger if you don't have a pellet tray or pellet tube, and those will smoke and smolder and provide some extra heat, not heat, some extra smoke. So those are some things you can try. The best thing that I've found that works is pellet trays. I use my Amazing pellet tray, and that gives me really nice dark bark. When I don't use it, I get really red mahogany colored bark, but it doesn't look like a classic Texas style dark bark brisket. So try those things and let me know how they turn out for you. Thomas Neal, hello from Minnesota. Hey man, really enjoy your channel. I just used my Oklahoma Joe in minus 15 degrees Fahrenheit weather. I too know the pain of smoking in cold weather because I live in Canada, and it gets down to like minus 40 degrees Celsius here, which actually is the same as minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit, I think. That's where the temperature graphs converge. It's really cold. That's all you need to know. What's the coldest temps you've ever smoked in? Already answered that, minus 40. And how much more fuel do you think you use? At least double. It uses a lot of fuel. And if you're using a pellet smoker and you go through maybe half a bag to get through a brisket, you'll go through a full bag or maybe even a bag and a half. It takes a lot more fuel when the temperatures dip. So be aware of that. Other things you can do is you can add a welding blanket over top of the smoker to insulate it. Or you can build a windshield around it, maybe with like a folding table or a couple folding tables, just to keep the wind from cooling that smoker down too much. All right, moving on to the next one. James Jin Lee, 2 questions. 1, opinion on backyard reverse offset smoker versus regular smoker. Okay, I don't really have an opinion. I have what other people have said in the past. I know offsets because that's what I smoke on. So direct flow offsets, heat comes out of the firebox. In some cases it goes up the throat plate or the baffle plate. In some cases it goes down. That's the style that I use. My baffle plate goes down and the heat goes in, up, around, over top of usually the brisket or ribs, whatever I'm cooking. Reverse flow, for those of you that don't know, the heat comes out of the firebox. It goes through a fully sealed baffle plate. So instead of the heat going directly up into the cooking chamber, it floats along this basically this tube that's fully covered off, and then it takes a sharp 90-degree turn, and then it goes into the cooking chamber from the other side, and it exits out the stack on the same side as the firebox. And what that does is, because all that heat is going underneath the baffle that's fully closed off and going up from one area right here, there's no radiant heat coming off the firebox from this end. It's just all convective smoke coming from that side, and it's a much more even cooking area in the chamber. You still do get the radiant heat because of the hot metal from the firebox side. So this side will always, on the firebox side, is still a little bit hotter because of that radiant heat. But in general, you will get more even temperatures than cooking on a direct flow offset, and that means more cooking surface, more square inches of cooking surface that's usable. That's what I've heard anyway. So moving on to the next question from James Jin. Do you still do set and forget smoking session via the snake minion method? In my offset smoker, yes, I do still do it sometimes. So what I do is I set up the Oklahoma Joe's fire basket box, and then I have some sort of dividers, and then I put some charcoal briquettes in there, interspersed with chunks, light one end, let it go. Sometimes I even use my tip-top temp on the stack to control the temperature a little bit. But now I'm more likely, if I'm doing that, to use my Weber Smoky Mountain. I have a Weber Smoky Mountain now, so I'll just tend to use that because it's kind of designed for that. But I still do it sometimes. And if you don't have a Weber Smoky Mountain or some other smoker, it's a good way to do set and forget. Okay, another question. I watched videos, that's his name. I've never used an offset, but I am a man and I have a brain. Okay. Will I be able to learn to use one? No, you'll never be able to learn how to use an offset smoker. I'm sorry, just give up. I'm just kidding. Obviously, yes, anyone can learn anything, and I'm sure you can learn. No, I guarantee you can learn how to use this. Do you have to store your wood inside like in a garage? Okay. Well, let me answer that first of all. Just watch my videos. After you get an offset smoker, start with an inexpensive one. You can get one on Craigslist for pretty cheap. Get it for like 100, 200 bucks. See if you like it. You can kind of cut your teeth on it, get used to it, and then you can kind of upgrade in the future once you experience the pain of an inexpensive offset smoker and you really get good at fire management. Anyone can learn it. Just watch my videos, and especially on fire management, and you'll pick it up really quickly. Wood does not have to be stored in a garage, but it is handy to do so because you can lower the moisture content quite a bit and keep everything nice and dry. One of the things I like to do is keep my moisture in my wood at like 10 to 15%. Sometimes I'll kiln dry it in my Masterbuilt electric smoker, so it gets down to that moisture level. You can pick up like a cheap $10 to $15 humidity meter, moisture meter on Amazon to check your wood moisture levels. Make sure in any case it doesn't go above 20-25% because that's considered wet wood and it'll give you a lot of issues. So yeah, I do keep my wood in the garage in like little milk crates. But those are the ones I've cut to size, I've dried out to my exact specifications, and I know I'm going to be using that wood to smoke with. I don't keep my whole wood pile in the garage. Whenever I run out of these milk crates full of my, prepared smoking wood, then I move on to chopping up and preparing some more wood and replacing those milk crates. So Anthony Solis, thanks Anthony for your question. Just recently purchased my first offset. Congratulations. Was just wondering, can I use only wood as fuel? No, you can use charcoal as fuel, and that will give you really nice low and slow temperatures. You can even add some chunks of wood on there from time to time if you want, but yeah, you can totally use charcoal. You'll go through a lot of charcoal and you'll have difficulty getting that temperature up to, 275, 300 if you want to cook that high, because the charcoal is really intended to provide a heat base that you can then put your splits on. But I've smoked with just charcoal before. It's perfectly fine. Just won't give you as much of that smoky flavor. Joseph Greenberg, thank you, Joe, for your comment or your question. You're in the Great White North. Yeah, bud, I'm in the Great White North, bud. Going to play some hockey with my toque. Yeah, I live in Canada. What's the coldest temp it's gotten down to outside while you were doing an overnight cook? As I said before, it's gotten down to minus 40 outside. But I've never done an overnight cook when it's that cold. So I'd say the coldest it's gotten when I'm doing an overnight cook is probably like minus 10, minus 15, minus 20 degrees Celsius. And you didn't ask this, but I'm sure this is what you're wondering. Does it affect it? Yeah, it does. If you're using like a Weber Smoky Mountain or my set and forget method on an offset smoker or even a pellet smoker, you'll run out of fuel really quickly. So whereas you might have got a method to do like 10, 12, 16 hours set and forget, without adding more fuel, you might only get like 5 or 6 hours out of it if it's super cold outside. So be aware of that. You got to monitor your fuel, and you might have to add a lot more. You might have to get up at 2 in the morning and add some more fuel. Adam Bessio, what do you think of Old Country Brazos for a first offset smoker? Thank you. So yes, I was right. It is Old Country, and Brazos is one of them. I think they're great. I think this other guy, he's got a YouTube channel, Rayleigh Smoke. I don't know how to pronounce Rayleigh. I'm sorry. I think it's Raleigh. I apologize, guys. I'm gonna learn that. I'm gonna look it up on Google pronunciation right after this. But go look up his channel. He cooks on an Old Country. I think it's like a Picos or Brazos, but he says good things about it. I like it because it has a bigger exhaust than the Oklahoma Joe's. So I think it would be probably a great one. It would probably have better airflow than the Oklahoma Joe's. Brad Villagianti. I've got a Green Mountain pellet smoker that has a central firebox. Cool. My brisket bottom burns a bit, and I'm thinking of buying something to raise the brisket up to give more space. Thoughts? Yeah, so... sorry, I'm just checking on my son. Looks like he's still sleeping. So I use just the top rack of my Traeger, but if you don't have a top rack, what you can do is you can use old barbecue grates. You can buy like an extra grate from Amazon, or look at Home Depot or Lowe's in the barbecue section for grates, or go to your local barbecue supply store and just like measure it and put some bricks on either side, and then set that grate on top of it, and then in the middle you'll have some air that's lifted further off of that really hot radiant heat deflector plate, so your brisket doesn't burn. The other thing I've done is I've had that set up, and then I put a water pan underneath it as well, just to get even more of a standoff distance. Or if all else fails, you can just cook it fat side down. I don't like that. I like to render the fat side up. I think you get better bark. You get better that sugar cookie texture, crispy texture. But that is one method. If you are having issues with burning your brisket, fat side down, or raise it up with some sort of rack that you've fashioned. Okay, moving on to Sultan BBQ Canada. Hey, welcome. Brisket, AAA or Prime American brisket. Okay. AAA brisket in Canada is the equivalent of prime grade brisket in the US. AAA brisket in Canada is the equivalent of choice grade brisket in the US. That's the one. That's the word I was looking for. AA brisket in Canada is the equivalent of select grade brisket in the US. So and then there's Canada Prime, which is the same as American Prime, USDA. So those are equivalent. So if I was choosing between a AAA brisket and an American Prime brisket, I would go with the American Prime brisket. And also in general, the grades are roughly equivalent, but American beef tends to be a little bit fattier than Canadian beef because from what I've heard, years and years ago, like I think it was like the 80s or 90s, Canada responded to this market pressure. People wanted leaner beef, and so we started breeding our beef to be leaner, and then while the Americans kept on just making good quality, high fat content beef. And as a result of that, we still have a hangover from that a little bit, and our beef is not as fatty as American beef. But from what I've heard, we've kind of mostly come out of that little dip, and our grades are almost identical. So AA is select, AAA is choice, and Canadian Prime is American Prime. What I do is I buy American Wagyu or Canadian Wagyu. It's Canadian Angus beef mixed with a Wagyu breed. I buy it from a local ranch, and that's the equivalent of like Canadian or American Prime plus 1,000. So that's how I get my beef. So look at Snake River Farms or something like that. They have a similar breed of beef. If you want like a super high quality beef, or if you're in Canada, look for a local American or Canadian Wagyu ranch to buy from. Okay, moving on. From Payne Yawn, I got a Masterbuilt 800 series gravity-fed charcoal smoker with a griddle top, and I 100% recommend getting one. First thing I did was watch one of your brisket videos. Came out perfect. Well, thanks, Payne. That wasn't a question, but that's all good. I love comments. I hope it works out for you. I haven't checked out those gravity-fed ones. I'd like to get one eventually, though. Marcin, he says, overnight brisket. You can finish it when convenient and keep it wrapped in the oven at the lowest temperature. This is how the restaurants do it. Okay, yeah. Thank you, Marcin. I appreciate that comment. I do that often, and I have done videos on it where I hold it in my oven at 150 overnight. I've had good results. I've had bad results. I think the thing that I'm missing in my oven is the humidity control. So I find that resting it or holding it for like 12 to 15 hours in the oven, in my oven, I can get a pretty consistent 150 and hold it, but it tends to dry out a little bit. And that's an issue. I think in these commercial restaurants, they have like actual proofing ovens where they can control moisture, and also they're holding a ton more brisket, so they're just creating their own atmosphere of moisture. But if you're using an oven like I am, I feel like it might dry it out a little bit. But with like, you know, a prime or Wagyu with lots of fat in it might not be as noticeable, and you can still get the benefits of that long holding period without drying it out too much. On a select grade brisket, I've tried it, and I did a video on it, and it dried it out a little bit too much. Select grade, AA grade, in my opinion, they're best when they're rested for only 2 hours. You can slice into them fresh. That's a big, Matt says, big upgrade you got with the odor smoker. Thanks, Matt. Can't wait to see what you do with it. I got a video coming out soon, so you'll be able to see that in action. Jaden Camp, super stoked to see your cooks on this new smoker. Thanks, man. Okay, here's an actual question. 664 Down Under. Down Under. I'm assuming you are from Australia. Welcome. Hey, mate, do you vacuum seal leftovers? Have you done a video on simply reheating, the best way for vacuum seal brisket or any meat cook leftovers? Cheers, mate. Love your videos. Thanks, man. Yeah, I do vacuum seal. I have a vacuum sealer. I use it mainly for competitions. When I inject everything, then I vacuum seal it. It keeps everything clean. For other leftovers, I just wrap them in plastic wrap, and then I wrap it in a layer of aluminum foil, put them in the coldest part of the freezer, freeze them quick. To reheat them, I don't do any sort of sous vide method or anything, although a lot of people have said that's a great way of doing it. I just put it in the oven covered in an aluminum foil pan, covered with aluminum foil, sealed, add a bit of liquid in there, like beef broth for a brisket, and then reheat it at like 225, 250 for hours, like 4 or 5 hours, until it gets up to like 150, 155. I find that slow, gradual rise in heat helps the most. So hope that helps. OTR Smalls, how do you like your Oklahoma Joe's smoker? I see it won't break the bank. How thick is the steel, and do you have a problem with the high temp paint peeling? Okay, first question. How do you like your Oklahoma Joe's smoker? Love it. It's the first offset smoker I got. I would have never gotten offset smoking if there wasn't a low price point smoker that I could get into and start experiencing the offset smoking lifestyle. So I love Oklahoma Joe's. I love the brand. It's a great smoker. It is inexpensive. Yeah, it's a great way to get into offset smoking, and it's not going to break the bank. So I would highly recommend it. How thick is the steel? I mean, it's not as thin as a lot of cheap offset smokers, but it's still pretty thin. It's not quarter inch. It's not even close to quarter inch like you have on bigger offsets. And how does the high temp paint hold up? On the firebox, not so well. On the bottom, it peels off pretty quickly, and on the top, it starts peeling off as well. So you'll have to either repaint it or do what I do and just re-season it with beef tallow or oil and bake that oil on. I'm not a big fan of paint anyway. Like even on these more expensive offset smokers, the paint on the firebox, it always eventually peels off. So don't get too caught up by that. The rest of the paint on the main body and everything, like I've left it uncovered. I haven't really, covered it all the time. It's rained, it's snowed on it, and it still holds up really well. Which brand of lump charcoal do you recommend, and why? Your videos have shed some light on why lump is better than briquettes. Well, different uses for different situations, but and then he says some barbecue Jesus light. Okay, yeah, I'll shed some barbecue Jesus light on this. lump charcoal that I would recommend. Recently, I've been using Jealous Devil a lot, and it's more expensive, but I find that it burns longer, it's cleaner, it has a cleaner flavor, and it burns at a more consistent temperature. So whereas I used to get these huge temperature spikes, I call it the Oklahoma Joe's roller coaster of lost dreams and temperature spikes, I get less of those temperature spikes with Jealous Devil. So yeah, that's a good charcoal. I've used a bunch of other ones that I've randomly picked up from Home Depot, Lowe's, and like you're lighting them and they crackle and they spit sparks back at you, or they burn too quickly. So you think you're getting a good deal, but you're actually not getting a good deal because the charcoal doesn't manage temperatures very well, doesn't burn consistently or cleanly, and you're just gonna have issues. So I shell out the money for the extra charcoal, and I'm sure I could do a test on it, but I think that I actually get more value for money with the Jealous Devil because I pay a bit more, but it lasts longer. So for example, I might go through a whole bag of another brand of charcoal for a brisket cook, but I only go through half a bag of the Jealous Devil. So I'm actually saving money, but I'm paying more for it. Is there any time you would use wood with high moisture soaked? Well, no, I would never soak my wood because that's just going to create a lot of creosote and dirty smoke, and the temperatures are going to struggle. It's going to sizzle a lot in the firebox before it lights. So that's not a good idea. But would I ever use like a 20-25% moisture content wood? Yeah, because you can get some really good flavors from that wood. I'd probably use that on like a really hot burning fire. I'm more likely to use a higher moisture content wood on my new Yoder smoker because it's got a big firebox and it can handle that higher moisture content. But on my Oklahoma Joe's, my small firebox, I like to use kiln dried, really low moisture content wood because it lights quickly, it gives me cleaner smoke, and it doesn't smolder as much. Okay, any other questions, thoughts on a smoke fire second generation smaller one? Okay, no, I don't have any thoughts on a smoke fire second gen smaller one. I think that's referring to the Weber smoke fire. The first generation had some issues. I saw Baby Back Maniacs a couple years ago. He tested it out, he didn't like it. So I guess there's a second generation now, I'm assuming by this question. I don't really have any thoughts on it. I hope they fix some of the issues that they had. Maybe one day I'll check one out. Chris Krieb says, ever smoked a goose? No, I do duck hunting though, and I do goose hunting sometimes, and I have cooked duck before. I've never done a goose though. My buddy does a lot of goose hunting, so maybe I'll get one. He's got a podcast called Hard Liquor and Hunting Stories, so I could probably do some sort of collaboration with him where I get a goose and I smoke it or something like that. I don't know if I'd really like it that much. Like like duck and the goose I've tasted in the past, it's really tough. It's really gamey. So I'd have to really kind of do some stuff to it in order to make it taste good. But that would be an interesting video. Okay, thanks a lot, guys. Really appreciate you guys joining me on these Ask Me Anythings. If you guys want to ask me more questions in real time, you can join my Patreon. I'll link it below. We got a nice little barbecue community there that's growing, and we're all committed to just getting better at barbecue. And you can ask me questions on our private Discord chat server anytime. Otherwise, if you do have any questions, just drop them in the comment section and I'll get to them in the next Ask Me Anything. Thanks a lot, guys, and happy smoking.